This week's topic is changing mindsets, creating understanding to end dementia stigma. Okay, so as we've been learning, dementia is a complex and challenging condition that affects millions of people around the world, yet it still remains widely stigmatized and misunderstood. So this week, we will explore how our mental models form our perceptions in relation to dementia and the stigma that's associated with it. We'll explore some of the ways that we can change our mental models, and we will shift our mindsets to reduce stigma and improve the lives of people living with dementia. Looking at this topic, let's define some key terms, one of them being mental models. So mental model is a cognitive framework that helps us to interpret and understand the world around us. It's like a mental map that we use to navigate our experiences and make sense of new information. Our mental models are shaped by our experiences, our beliefs, and our values, and they can be both conscious and unconscious. Mental models can influence how individuals perceive and stigmatize dementia. Misunderstandings or negative stereotypes about dementia can lead to increased stigma. Mental models are those cognitive frameworks that individuals use to understand and interpret the world around them. So as the slide says, mental models are those cognitive frameworks in our mind that shape how we interpret the world. So by becoming aware of our mental models about dementia, we can shift them to be more inclusive and more compassionate. So negative or inaccurate mental models of dementia can lead to misconceptions, fear, and stigma. These models may be based on outdated information or lack of experience with people living with a dementia diagnosis. Accurate information and positive interactions can help shift mental models and end stigma. So if someone holds a negative or inaccurate mental model of dementia, it could lead to those misconceptions. So if you have a better understanding of dementia as the medical condition that it is, people are more likely to approach it with empathy and support, which therefore reduces stigma. Education and awareness campaigns can help reshape these mental models and contribute to a more informed and compassionate society. So, what is stigma? Stigma refers to the negative attitudes and beliefs and behaviors that are associated with a particular condition or group of people. Stigma can lead to discrimination, prejudice, and social exclusion, and it can have a profound impact on people's lives and their well-being. It can isolate people that are living with a dementia diagnosis and prevent them from seeking help and support. So what is the common perceptions towards dementia? So negative stigma, it's often, dementia is often associated with negative stereotypes and stigma. Part of this comes from lack of awareness. Many people are unaware of the signs and the symptoms of dementia. Another one is misinformation. Misinformation about dementia is very, very common. So it is important to understand these common perceptions towards dementia in order to create effective mental models for understanding and helping to manage the condition. So the root of dementia stigma, where does it come from? Again, it's that lack of understanding, the fear of the unknown, stereotypes, and lack of support. But these four factors, and I mean, there are many more factors, but these are like the strong roots of the dementia stigma. They really contribute to the shame and the stigma that is associated with a dementia diagnosis. And that's either from self or from care partners, family members, community members. So how are some ways that stigma is formed? One of them is social media. So stigma can be formed through the spread of misinformation on social media, and we know how fast that information can spread on social media. And, just because it's on the internet doesn't make it true. Media representation. So stigma can be formed through the way that certain groups are represented in the media. Peer pressure. Stigma can be formed through peer pressure to conform to certain beliefs or behaviors. Misinformation. Stigma can be formed through the spread of false information. Discrimination. So again, stigma can be formed through discrimination against certain groups and certain individuals. Cultural norms. Cultural norms, stigma can be formed through this because there's maybe things that are accepted by society in one culture that may not be necessarily accepted in another. Language. Stigma can be formed through language that is used to describe certain groups. And this language is a very powerful tool. We'll get a little bit more into person-centered language, a little bit more into this webinar. Prejudice. Stigma can be formed through prejudice. It can be formed through fear because it's the unknown or the unfamiliar. Another one is ignorance. It can be formed through ignorance of certain groups or issue, and that can be intentional ignorance or it can be unintentional ignorance. So how does the effects of stigma affect an individual's quality of life? Now, this stigma affects many different individuals, many different conditions. So this is kind of an overall, how does it affect one's mental health and mental well-being? So when you look at the severity of it, you look at the decreased self-esteem, it's really high just from the effects of stigma. On a scale of 1 to 5, it's sitting at a 3. You look at the isolation rate, it's actually higher than the decreased self-esteem, sitting at a 4 out of 5. Then you've got depression. Stigma has a huge effect on quality of life and depression. And this is sitting at a severity of a 1 out of 5. That's really high. The next one is anxiety, and that one's sitting at the same as the social isolation. It's 1 out of 4. So stigma has a significant impact on quality of life, affecting self-esteem, isolation, depression, and anxiety. And we know that those are the things that really contribute to a strong quality of life and are very beneficial for all individuals, no matter the diagnoses. So why should we consider changing our mental models? Well, attitudes and assumptions, if we can challenge our assumptions about aging and dementia, we can help reduce that stigma. And we talk about all the time that it takes a village. And, it just starts with one person changing their attitudes and their assumptions. And it's amazing at how that will spread outwards. The other one is you want to see the person. You want to focus on the person behind the diagnosis, as this promotes dignity, inclusion, and also empowerment. And again, language. Using respectful, inclusive language combats stereotypes and misconceptions. So by examining and updating our mental models, this creates more compassionate communities. So again, changing mental models encourages people to adopt new perspectives, and think differently about situations. This approach can aid in reducing prejudice regarding issues such as dementia by challenging existing beliefs. So changing mental models can greatly benefit stigma against dementia in many ways. It can help challenge and dispel the misconceptions and stereotypes that surround dementia. By promoting a more accurate and understanding of the condition, we can shift the focus from fear to empathy and support. This hopefully can lead to a more inclusive and compassionate society for those living with dementia and their care partners. So how do we do this? How does one go about changing their mental model? So one of them is to examine your assumptions. So reflect on beliefs and values that guide your thinking and question to see if they need updating. Consider different perspectives. Put yourself into someone else's shoes to broaden your viewpoint. Question your biases. Identify any biases that might distort your perceptions and find ways to counteract them. So by challenging your existing mental models, you can develop more inclusive mindsets that work toward combating stigma. And it's every step that we need. So by changing mental models, it encourages a shift in perspective. Instead of viewing dementia solely as a cognitive decline, we can recognize the unique strengths and abilities that individuals with dementia possess. By acknowledging their capabilities and fostering a person-centered approach, we can empower individuals to continue living fulfilling lives and participating actively within their communities. So shifting our mental models, what does that look like? So one of them is challenge those assumptions. Question our preconceived notions about dementia and the abilities of those living with it. So changing mental models involves a deliberate process of identifying and challenging existing beliefs, assumptions, and ways of thinking. So another thing you want to do is you want to focus on abilities. Emphasize on remaining strengths and abilities in individuals, and this is all individuals, rather than focusing on losses. Foster empathy. Make an effort to understand perspectives of those living with dementia, those supporting an individual with dementia, and other individuals. Combat isolation. You want to counter social isolation by building inclusive communities. Now, this means for everyone. This is for individuals with the dementia diagnoses, care partners, community members. You really want to open up that safe space to have everyone feel that they can be themselves and feel included. Another one is educating ourselves. You really want to seek out accurate information about dementia. So, how do you go about shifting that mental model? One of the first things that you want to do is you want to identify your current mental model. Recognize your current beliefs and your assumptions about a particular topic or situation. So in this instance, it's about dementia. Take a couple of moments here now and just think about what is your current belief and your assumptions about dementia? Let's question our mental models related to dementia. We often hold assumptions or beliefs without examining the evidence behind them. So by pausing to evaluate, to think why we think the way that we do about dementia, we can identify opportunities to update our perspectives. So typically, our mental model of dementia often includes assumptions that is an inevitable part of aging, that there is no prevention or treatment, and that people with dementia cannot contribute meaningfully to society. However, research shows that dementia risk can be reduced through healthy behaviors. So those are those mitigating factors, those mitigating risk factors we've spoken about before. And people diagnosed with dementia can still engage in a really strong, meaningful life. We must expand our mental models to reduce that stigma. So again, ask yourself why you believe what you do and whether there is evidence to support your beliefs. Consider alternative perspectives and ideas. So again, question your mental model. So a mental model, again, is an explanation of how something works in the real world. It is a representation of an idea, a perception, or a system. And you want to identify your mental model. That may take a little while to do. Again, it's like peeling back that onion. So you want to reflect on your current assumptions and beliefs about dementia and be aware of that mental model. It's having that self-awareness and that emotional intelligence to recognize your thoughts and your beliefs. Gather information. So learn about dementia from reliable sources to help expand your knowledge. Another one is challenging your thinking. Question if your mental model aligns with facts. Be open to changing your assumptions. And if you find that you need to update your mental model, that's fantastic. Integrate new information to evolve your mental model, especially when it comes to learning about dementia. Again, looking at how to change your mental model. I realize that we do go over this information a couple of times, but research shows that it takes multiple times for information to be spoken or read or observed, viewed, for the information to sink in. So that's why we're going to kind of repeat things. So again, how do you change that mental model? You want to recognize your current mental model. So reflect on your assumptions and beliefs about dementia and people with dementia. So identify any negative stereotypes that you may hold. Learn the facts about dementia and the lived experiences of people with dementia. Seek out resources and personal stories. The next thing you want to do is you want to challenge your stereotypes. So question biased assumptions. Avoid that language that promotes stigma. So, stereotypes. What's a perfect stereotype? Everybody that has gray hair, therefore, must be old. Perfect example of a stereotype. Everyone that gets older is going to get dementia. That is just a stereotype. Well, we realize that the age of 65 and beyond does increase your risk factors for dementia. It is not a guarantee that you will, as soon as you hit 65 or older, that you will have a dementia diagnosis. So then the next thing is change your speech and your behaviors. So you want to use respectful person first language. You want to treat people not only with dementia, but all individuals with dignity and compassion. You don't want to be like, hey, the demented one over there, or oh, the dementia patients. It's that respectful person first language. You identify the person first. You see the person, you don't see the diagnoses. So what are one of the things that we can do also to change that mental model? So it's seek out new information. So look for information that challenges your current existing mental model. Read books, articles, research studies that offer different perspectives. You want to seek information from individuals that may have experience in working with an individual with dementia, a person with a dementia diagnosis, healthcare partners, anybody out there, basically to get a new perspective on how others see dementia. And you want to engage in conversations. So talk to people with different perspectives on the topic. Listen to their ideas and their experiences, and consider how what they have to say and their experiences may change your mental model. Again, and it's an important way to understand experiences and build connections. You want to approach every interaction with patience, empathy, and openness to learn. And in my opinion, that applies for all situations in life. It's not just working with individuals with a dementia diagnosis. So you want to create safe and inclusive spaces for these sensitive discussions, because there is quite a bit of bias, stigma, and shame that is associated with dementia. You really want to try and create that safe space so that someone feels comfortable and safe so that they can open up and speak about it. Not everyone, it may take some individuals a little bit longer to open up. I think of an example of one of the in-person events that we've done. We had an individual that is a care partner that was dealing with a diagnosis for her husband. He had been placed. She really opened up to us. There was a lot of good conversation going back and forth, a little bit of tears. And it was interesting because at the end of it, her friend came up to me and said that's the first time she has spoken about any of this in the past 7 months. So, it's all in your own time. And when you feel comfortable and safe to discuss anything, but us as community members, it's always good to be very aware to try and create those safe, inclusive spaces and hold that space for the person. So, define those sensitive discussions. Identify topics that are considered sensitive and require a safe and inclusive space for discussion. So there's nothing wrong with naming it. There's nothing wrong with sitting with an individual and be like, I want to create and hold space for you and make this a comfortable and safe opportunity. Establish ground rules, and expectations for respectful dialogue. Follow the model of what that person wants. What are they comfortable with? How are they comfortable with their diagnoses being addressed? Are they open and have candor about it, or are they more closed off and introspective and really try and work off those clues and those cues from the individual? And the other thing you want to do is you want to encourage inclusion. So you want to foster that environment of acceptance and understanding for all participants, and try and shift that mental model so that there is no judgments or stereotypes there. And again, this is work, and there's nothing wrong in having these discussions and creating these safe and inclusive spaces to actually say, hey, I'm working on my mental model and shifting my perspective. I'd appreciate some understanding and even some coaching from you. But I think that by being open to all individuals, and by creating that safe space, because we're not perfect, even though I try to be person-centered, there are times where, my language could be a lot more strengths-based. So again, creating that safe and inclusive space for sensitive discussions is essential to shifting mind models and ending dementia stigma. So the other thing you want to do is reflect on your own experiences. So consider how your own experiences may have shifted your mental model. So be open to the possibility that your experiences may not be representative of everyone else's. I've shared in the past that when I was younger, my grandma had a dementia diagnosis, and I did not understand. It was not explained to me. And the verbiage and the terminology back then was not person-centered. So my grandma was demented, and it scared me. So that really shaped my experiences growing up, that to me, dementia was something that was scary and it was frightening. And now the more that I know, the more education and the knowledge, and the ability to work with persons with a dementia diagnosis, it has really opened up my mindset and my mental model that we are all individuals. We all have purpose. We all have strengths. And deep inside, I'm still me. And I wished that I would not have been so scared of my grandma. Um, yeah, but that's, to me, that's an example of how that experience may have shifted my mental model. So it's taken quite a bit of time over the years to shift that mental model. And like I said, it takes time. So personal experiences and narratives can be powerful tools to challenge attitudes and beliefs. So like I mentioned, my experience with my grandma, it was a really powerful tool to change my attitude and my beliefs. And when you really, it's that whole walking a mile in someone else's shoes. When you sit and have conversations with individuals that support an individual with a dementia diagnosis, it may not be what you expect it to look like. When you have conversations with an individual that does have a dementia diagnosis, it may look different than what you thought it would. But again, diagnoses are individualistic as we are people. So it does not manifest completely the same in everyone else. So by getting that narrative and having those personal experiences can really broaden your mindset and to work on changing that perception, challenging your attitudes and your beliefs. So, as mentioned, changing our mindsets and shifting our mental models is not easy, but it is very necessary to end stigma around dementia. So, by practicing new ways of thinking, we can start to unravel our assumptions and see dementia in a new light. One other way that I have worked personally on myself to change mental models is I have adopted something called learned optimism. One of the things that we do as humans is we have a tendency to shift always to the bad of something, as opposed to looking to the positive of something. So every morning when I wake up, I have to make a choice. Am I going to have a good day or am I going to have a bad day? And not every day is good. Some of those mornings are extremely challenging, but I flip it so that I've got optimism and I try to look at what is good in the situation. Because as there can be many negative things that happen in life, I try to find the good in it. So when you're changing your mental model, you want to monitor your progress. Like anything else, you want to pay attention to how your mental model is changing over time. You need to be persistent and patient because it can be a very slow and gradual process. So you want to pay attention to thoughts and feelings. Notice any changes in your thoughts, assumptions, and emotional reactions regarding dementia as you learn new information. You want to reflect on past beliefs. You want to look back on the belief that you held previously about dementia and consider about how your perspective has shifted. Be aware of behavior changes. Recognize if you respond differently to people with dementia in your life as your understanding grows. So changing mental models about aging, dementia, and caregiving encourages caregivers, families, and professionals and the public to take a more proactive and compassionate approach to dementia care and research. We must shift away from the fear and hopelessness and move more towards an understanding, meaningful connection, and empowerment. So when you change mental models, it encourages a more proactive approach to dementia care and research. It promotes the belief that there is still much that can be done to improve the lives for those that have a dementia diagnosis. This includes investing in research, developing innovative interventions, and creating supportive environments that enable individuals with a dementia diagnosis to thrive. So, changing the mindsets to combat dementia stigma. One of the first things you want to do is you want to recognize the problem. So acknowledge that societal stigma surrounding dementia does exist and it hurts those with the disease. Even though we've got thousands and thousands of people with a dementia diagnosis over the world, there is still stigma and there is still difficulty in working with individuals with dementia and supporting them to be inclusive within our communities. So understand the cause of the stigma. So realize that stigma stems from misconceptions about dementia, such as it is an inevitable, hopeless disease, which it is not. There's so much hope that can be found within dementia. Adopt a new perspective. So view dementia as a condition deserving of understanding and compassion, not fear. And I say this for everything. It should not only be for dementia, but just as us as individuals within the community. You really want to be understanding as all individuals are deserving of compassion and it should not be feared. The other one is taking action. So you want to combat that stigma through education, inclusive language, political advocacy, and person-centered dementia care. The how. So how do we go about this? So we know that there's many benefits to changing our mental models. So how can we change those mental models and shift our mindsets when it comes to dementia stigma? One of the things you want to do is learn about dementia, which is what you have all been doing. So as we know, dementia is an overall syndrome that is caused by diseases that affect the brain. Learn about the symptoms of dementia, common symptoms like memory loss, confusion, and mood changes. And recognize that it's not a normal part of aging and that dementia is caused by underlying diseases. And as we mentioned, 65 and above is a risk factor, but it is not a guarantee that you will get a dementia diagnosis. So one of the best ways to be able to challenge our mental models is to learn more about dementia. So how do you do this? This can involve reading books, watching documentaries, attending lectures, workshops, events, webinars such as this, We're talking to people who have first-hand experience with the condition. This could be healthcare workers, a care partner, a person with a dementia diagnosis, someone that has, we've all been affected, I think, by someone with a dementia diagnosis. By gaining a deeper understanding of what dementia is and how it affects people, we can begin to challenge our preconceived notions and stereotypes. What's one of the big things that we should do is focus on the person and not the condition. So focus on the abilities, the personality, and the life experiences that make individuals unique. When we talk about with people with dementia, it is important to remember that they are more than just their condition. And this also falls for any other individuals. They are individuals with unique personalities, interests, and life experiences. By focusing on the person rather than the diagnoses, we can help reduce stigma and promote empathy and understanding. By focusing on what is right with someone rather than what is wrong with someone is a fantastic perspective to have. I am a recreation therapist by trade, and a lot of my training follows under positive psychology, which was written by Dr. Martin Seligman. So that positive psychology, again, work on what's right with the individual as opposed to what's wrong with the individual. Strengths-based is versus what can I or they do versus what they can't do. So let's not look at the deficiencies or the barriers, though barriers are important to address, but let's look at the needs-based. Let's look at the strengths based on everyone and what they have to offer. Another one is challenging stereotypes. Again, it's important to challenge stereotypes about dementia and those living with it. It's important to challenge stereotypes of all different areas, not just dementia. So we must strive to create an understanding and supportive environment for those living with dementia and other community members as well. So dementia is often associated with negative stereotypes, such as loss of memory, confusion, combative behaviors, and dependency. However, these stereotypes are not always accurate and can strongly contribute to the stigma and discrimination. By challenging these stereotypes and recognizing the diversity of experiences among people with dementia, we can promote a more positive and inclusive attitude towards those with a dementia diagnosis. So stereotyping, how do we change the narrative on that? And it's challenging, but you avoid broad generalizations. So stereotyping often involves making unfair generalizations about groups of people. Avoid language that characterizes all people with dementia in the same way. So a broad generalization. Everyone that's older, therefore has a dementia diagnosis. Another broad generalization. Mild cognitive impairment or mild cognitive decline. Oh, that person must have dementia because they're old. Someone's not a great driver. Oh, they must have dementia because they're all over the road and they need their license taken away from them. So it's these broad generalizations about groups of people, and they're usually unfair. The other thing you want to do is you want to challenge your own assumptions. So we all have unconscious biases. So make an effort to notice your own assumptions about people with dementia and reconsider them. So it's always an ongoing process. So as mentioned, see the individual. Get to know people with dementia as individuals with unique personalities, backgrounds, and experiences. The other thing we want to do is we want to use person-centered language. So we want to say person or people with dementia rather than a demented person or people. Identity comes first. Your diagnosis does not identify who you are as a person. So share positive images. Counter those stereotypes by sharing positive, empowering images of people with dementia. An instance of stereotyping is I used to work with a lady that had a dementia diagnosis in the day program, and her husband was of the opinion that anybody that had a dementia diagnosis did not have quality of life or anything to contribute to quality of life. And she did beautiful artwork. It was something that came out during her diagnosis. We learned that she was quite the artist. And he came to pick her up one day from the day program, and she was so excited to show him her drawing. And he got very upset with her because he was like, I thought you said you told me you had dementia. How come you could draw this picture? So there's that stereotype right there, that there was that misunderstanding that individuals with dementia cannot perform in activities or have quality of life. It was a bit of a process to try and do an education piece with him to have him understand that. All right, so one of the things we were talking about is choose your words. So you really want to use that person-centered language. So the words that we use to describe people with dementia can have a really strong and significant impact on how they're perceived and they're treated. So by using that person-centered language, such as a person with dementia rather than a dementia patient, can really help promote dignity and respect and reduce stigma. And it really gives empowerment. I mean, I don't want to be known as, here comes loud Kim. I can be Kim who is loud, but I don't want the loud to define me as who I am as a person. So foster social connections. So as we've known over these past couple of weeks, that social connections are vital for the well-being of all people, especially those that are diagnosed with dementia. So by encouraging intergenerational activities, community events, and social gatherings, these can help foster meaningful relationships and combat isolation. So social isolation and loneliness are common experiences among people with dementia and can really contribute to those feelings of stigma and exclusion. By fostering those social connections and by creating those supportive communities, including individuals in conversations, in activities, in events, in community groups, we can help reduce that stigma and promote inclusion and well-being. So changing your mental model to destigmatize. So what does that mean? So you want to seek out facts and ideas that contradict your views. So actively look for information, data, and perspectives that challenge your current understanding. It could be something completely abstract and very different from what you're used to, but it's that seeking out that different information that really can help change that mental model. We spoke about cognitive reserve, neuroplasticity before. By seeking out these new facts, that can also build your cognitive reserve and your neuroplasticity. And again, talk to people with different experiences. Have open and non-judgmental conversations with people whose backgrounds and viewpoints differ from your own. Question your assumptions. You want to reflect on the unconscious bias assumptions and generalize the generalizations that you hold and reconsider them. You may not need to change your assumption or your medical model, but it's very good to be aware of those biases, those assumptions, and those generalizations that you hold, because some of them are deeply ingrained, and some of the ones that I have been there since I was a child. Another one is change your media diet. So read, watch, and listen to sources outside of your norm to broaden your perspective. So these are things such as, don't take Wikipedia as a good resource, evidence-based resource, because, Wikipedia is based mainly on people's opinions and perspectives. Do some research, read some journal articles, read some evidence-based papers, some scenarios. And again, if you are ever looking for any information on this, you can check out our website, as we are always adding resources and information to that. So another way to challenge your mental model, and this one's hard, but it's admit when you're wrong. So you want to be open to changing your mind when presented with new convincing evidence. We may hold something that we hold very dear and very strongly to us, and it may not be right, or it may just need a little bit of shift in our mental model because it may be leading to an assumption that may not be correct. So when you destigmatize dementia, by changing mental models and shifting mindsets, it really requires a multifaceted approach that involves education, empathy, and social engagement. So by working together to challenge stereotypes and promote person-centered language, fostering supportive communities, I feel that we can reduce stigma and improve the lives of individuals living with a dementia diagnosis, their care partners, community members, and just overall quality of life for all. So what are some actions that you can take? So again, and I realize that a lot of this information is repeated, but it's like how we talked about that you need to hear it multiple times in order for that information to stick. So educate on facts about dementia. So share accurate information about what dementia is and common misconceptions to reduce fear or misunderstanding. So share what you know. And if you hear someone that is uh, highlighting a stereotype or have a really strong misconception or might have a different piece of information than you do, feel free by sharing that with them. But it's like anything else. You want to do it in a gentle, respectful manner, so that that person would be more open to hearing what it is that you have to say. And another one is highlight remaining abilities. And I try to say this to everyone that I have any conversation with when it comes to working with an individual with a dementia diagnosis, and actually anyone. You really want to note the capabilities that remain even in the later stages of any individual. This is whether we're aging, we have a diagnosis, or we don't. Even people that we work with, you want to focus on the person's strengths. You don't want to focus on the limitations. You want to focus on what they can do and what is right. And you want to build upon that, and you want to hopefully grow that with that person. And it's very empowering, especially in a self-efficacy manner, to have these strengths-based things pointed out to you because again, as I mentioned, as humans, we have a tendency to focus on the negative as opposed to what is the positive. That is the first thing I will focus on with myself is, oh my gosh, the things that went wrong. And so I need to flip my mindset and flip my perspective to go to, okay, let's look at what went right. So, and again, another one is emphasize that personhood. And this is with anyone, but regard that person with dementia first rather than reducing them to the disease. So I'm not Dementia Kim. I'm not my friend that has dementia and her name is Kim. I am Kim and I happen to have a dementia diagnosis. So you want to include diverse voices. So platform experiences of people with dementia and caregivers from many different backgrounds. One of the things that we're doing is we are developing a toolkit and a resource page that we're hoping to have a vast variety of different backgrounds and experiences for people with dementia and care partners, because that looks different, as we mentioned, depending on the individual, depending on the diagnoses, depending the situation, what the care partner situation looks like, cultural considerations. And one of the things we're going to do is we're going to try to upload a lot of videos like that onto our website so that it's in one spot so that you can get the cultural diversity of what that diversity looks like, because dementia does look differently in different countries. And we talked about cognitive reserve a couple of weeks ago, and we know that cognitive reserve is not as high in individuals, particularly from third world countries or that don't have higher education. So the way that dementia manifests in those countries is different than, say, here in Canada. So to wrap this up, the one last thing that we can do to to change our mindsets, to help combat stigma within ourselves and within our communities, it is to convey hope. So share those positive stories and development that happen in care and research. One of the things I try to do when I'm speaking with individuals that may be a care partner or an individual living with diagnoses is I try to ask them, I say, okay, so tell me something good. And it can take time. Sometimes they can't come up with anything good at that moment, but then I will pose it as a challenge and say, tell me something good and hopeful that has come out of all of this. Because at times it can seem very hopeless, but with anything else, there is definitely that learned optimism that you can look at. And one of the things that we can do to reduce the stigma and improve the lives of individuals living with and supporting those with a dementia diagnosis is to convey that there is hope. So I'm just going to open up one video here.
I felt as though I wanted to run away. I wanted to almost die at that point, because it felt to me as though it was going to be the end of my life.
It was frightening because it's not a word, dementia is not a word that you say lightly, and it's not a happy word.
Generally, it isn't well understood. There is still a lot of stigma about a diagnosis of dementia. I think many members of the general public tend to think when someone's diagnosed with dementia, they're immediately at that stage of staring into space. They don't know that it occurs over many years.
I never thought that young people would have dementia. Yeah. But obviously young people do. It was like something very important was taken from me. And it has been.
We don't get as many visitors anymore. You lose a lot of friends and family who don't know how to approach you, don't know whether to say something.
There's that fear factor there for dementia. I'm not sure why that is, and it shouldn't be.
I've got some good friends at the local Warhope Bowling Club. When we first arrived here a little while back, didn't tell them straight away because I was worried about stigma. I wanted to be judged as they first saw me. Dementia is fatal, and if more people realise that, perhaps there wouldn't be as many jokes about it.
I might have trouble with my memory, but there's things that I can do and still have some value, still have some worth, and be part of a community. We can be involved in the community.
Dementia friendly means understanding dementia, that the people know how they can help.
It means being able to tell the people next to you that you've got dementia, and for them to say, oh yeah, no worries Keith, how you going?
To me, it's a place where you feel safe, where people are prepared to wait for you to be slow.
It's, I think, the very small things that people do that can make such a big difference.
The ladies in choir have been absolutely beautiful to me. A group of the ladies put together a great big file for me with the words much larger so that I had a better chance of being able to read the words.
As a volunteer, it's been great because it gives me an opportunity to be out and about again. A lot of it is just weeding gardens for elderly people that are no longer in a situation to do a lot of that work.
My life is still worthwhile. I still have purpose.
I've got no desire to give up or stop. I want to keep living. I want to be part of everything.
We're still people, we still have feelings, we still have emotions, we can still contribute to society.
That video makes me quite emotional, actually, because, you know, it just goes to show the importance of how stigma can affect people. And, you know, as they say, there's still purpose, they still have life, they still have a life worth living, you know, and everyone does. So on that note, I thank you very much for joining us today. Bye-bye.